Ned Kelly's remains were finally identified by experts 5 months ago, but they're far from being laid to rest. As Cheryl Hall discovered, a dispute has erupted between Kelly's descendants, who want him buried near his mother in northern Victoria, and the developers of a housing estate at the old Pentridge prison.
Is where the executions took place, and the bodies were brought out at the end, and Ryan was buried directly across here, but the bodies that were brought from the old Melbourne jail were placed over in this area, which has now been built upon, and that's where Ned Kelly's remains were found, in this area here.
It's still a grim place. 16 years after Pentridge prison closed, the gallows still loom above the prison burial ground. It was here in the middle of an expanding housing development that archaeologists found their holy grail.
Kelly's remains were with 23 other boxes in a large square mass grave. There were 2 layers of burial boxes and coffins buried in that mass grave. It was very, very deep, much deeper than a normal burial would be. There were some normal coffins included in that mass grave, but most of them were these utilitarian boxes that originally were designed for some other purpose. One of these is a box for nails, the other one is a box for the handles of sledgehammers.
The mass graves contain the bones of executed prisoners which were moved from the old Melbourne jail in 1929. The bones had been picked out of disintegrating coffins by labourers and mixed together in the boxes, except for Ned Kelly.
The biggest surprise of the whole project was that Kelly's remains, which we believed had been the target of ransacking and trophy hunting at various times, Kelly's remains were almost 95% complete. He was almost the most complete of all the burials at Pentridge.
DNA evidence confirmed the bones were Kelly's, as did physical signs.
Inside the tibia or the lower leg were removed 2 small pellets.
Up until now, it's been assumed by Kelly's descendants that he'd be laid to rest near his mother in the small town of Greta in northern Victoria.
We have 3, maybe 4 Kelly descendants in the cemetery, all unmarked graves. I was told many years ago that there may have been a marker on the grave, and in those days it may have been a bit of timber or with a name of Kelly on it, which may have been taken.
But Ned Kelly is causing just as much division as he did when he was alive. The exhumation licence that allowed his bones and the others to be moved to the Victorian Institute of Forensic Medicine requires all the remains to be returned to Pentridge. The new owners of Pentridge Village Housing Estate haven't agreed to any change.
Actually, nobody owns human remains. There is an existing licence which requires that the bodies that were dug up and exhumed here at Pentridge, there is a requirement that those bodies are reburied. I don't think they'd have a case to claim ownership, but they certainly have a current licence which requires the burial at the site, so that would need to be modified.
A spokesman for the Attorney-General says the government has received no indication from the landowner if he'll give his approval. But a precedent has been set by the family of the last man hanged in Australia, Ronald Ryan.
When the families have come forward and demonstrated beyond any doubt that these are the remains of their family members, the government has set this protocol of handing the remains over to families.
Peter Norden was the prison chaplain at Pentridge.
When I suggested to Ryan's daughters that they put in a claim for exhumation to the Department of Health and we were successful, there was a long delay, and it was the commercial operator of this property seeking to make a quid out of the place that was causing that delay. If the same person is causing a delay in this case, I think it's a scandal, and I think the Victorian government should act.
Heritage Victoria also wants Kelly's remains returned to his family. But there are also the commingled remains of more than 30 other prisoners exhumed from Pentridge and now being stored by the Victorian Institute of Forensic Medicine.
This one's interesting. You just see the name John Conda written in lead pencil just on the lid there. So that would have been Conda, who was again one of they're all executed murderers with almost no exception. And the date of his execution's up there, 28/8/94. So even that is this suggestion that someone doing this work did sort of bother enough to get the pencil out and write the name on there, but that's all they got. There was no plaques or anything else. Sort of would have been easier if there was a Kelly inscription on one of these boxes. These are significant figures in Victoria's criminal history and to some degree in Victoria's wider history. Not to say we should celebrate these people in any way, and I think the community has an interest in what might become of those.
If the commercial operator of this property is interested in putting up a memorial, let him put up a big memorial in here for the unknown people who are executed, Indigenous people and others whose remains were here for 70, 80 years.
Under the exhumation permit, those remains are required to be reburied at Pentridge, but it may take a ruling by the Attorney-General to decide the final resting place of Ned Kelly.
The Trust would really like to have Ned come back to his mother. They're all to be treated in the same respect. It doesn't matter what they've done in their past life.
And the developer of Pentridge Village was invited to put his side, but he declined to speak publicly.